So
it's crazy how people will let idolization trump policy. I still think that's quite disturbing to actually think about, because you can have, I think you've pointed this out to me in the past, where there was a Singh who was running for UKIP and everyone's like, let's vote for the Singh. And I was like, but what does he stand for? He stands for UKIP policies. You can't vote for that if you're Sikh. Yeah. That doesn't work for you. So it's a similar mentality that really frustrates me, because you need to see what they're standing for, not the person themselves.
I'm glad you said that, because actually we don't need to look as far as Punjab to get that understanding. Just look at the UK. Look at the people.
No, you can look at the UK now and you got the same thing. Yeah.
How many people who are Sikh in this country support Tan Tesi and his being an MP, and we stand behind you, Tan, without ever knowing a single policy that he stands for? And I don't mean as a member of the Labour Party. Generally, most Sikhs will side because he's a Labour Party candidate anyway. But most of them won't know what his specific policy is, for example, in regard to HS2, which is a big deal for his constituents in Slough.
Yeah.
And most Sikhs might not have an opinion on HS2, right? But I did things like that. No one's actually asked to see, well, what is your policy for the local constituents of Slough that you're representing? Ultimately, that's who he's representing. We just back him because he's a Singh and he's a Sardan, he's one of us.
It's true.
There's a raw animalistic kind of tribalism that's taking place here, and we're afraid to say that out loud.
But there's one thing he does do, Harvey, which is he calls out the opposition on a lot of issues that affect his people. So he will push back on all the issues of, say, Islamophobia, racism, all those things that have affected him and Sikhs growing up.
Jaggi Jol, he's spoken about Jaggi Jol, he's spoken about the Punjab farmers.
Yeah, he's spoken about that. And he mentions it frequently. He doesn't just say it once tick box, he'll come back to it. And anytime he gets a chance to talk about it, he raises it. Even in the last week, he brought up the whole fact of tokenism in the Tory government and the new policy that have gone through, which I wanted to bring up today. So there's a new immigration policy that's passed through that essentially allows the government, it's not been passed through yet, it's in motion, but it gives the government the chance to take away any immigrants' British citizenship without notice, without reason, which is frightening, because essentially it means that all people who are from immigrant parents can have their citizenship taken away at any moment. So you're a second-class citizen now in the UK. And he's saying you've got a big diverse Tory front bench of, the most diverse cabinet ever, who haven't pushed back on this at all, haven't mentioned any of it, which is worrying. So therefore it's tokenism. And to an extent, he's correct, because why else have them there then?
But then this is where I'm saying our political naivety has reared itself again. You're right to point out, not only does he talk on all these issues, and I've mentioned a couple he's done, and that's why people say, look, Sadi Gal Karda, it's good. We've at least got a voice there. But where I'm saying that's politically naive is that I'm not going to win any fans for this, and I don't expect you two to necessarily agree, right? You can murmur and say, yep, that's fine, but I don't want you to agree, in fact. Have your own opinion on it, but that's not his job. He hasn't been elected. He hasn't been elected to speak on behalf of the Sikhs of this country. And I want to put on record again, because I've done this once before, I don't want him speaking on behalf of the Sikhs in this country. I don't. If someone said, well, who should then? I don't know. We should have that conversation, don't you think? Been here long enough now. We should say, who's speaking on our behalf? We should have that conversation separately. It shouldn't be de facto Inderjeet Singh because it shouldn't be Inderjeet Singh because he got appointed as a Lord. It shouldn't be Tan Tesi or Preet Gill because they got elected to the House of Commons.
Yeah.
It should be something in a different system. But it is what it is. This is what I'm saying. I'd like to see, I'm trying not to sound like I'm being too negative about it. What I'd like to see is turn it on its head and say, why don't we just become a little bit more politically astute? Let's all start talking about these things regularly and say, look, let's just calm down a little bit. If someone talks about these things in Parliament, it doesn't necessarily change things. And I'm glad you nicely segued over to the border and immigration bill that got passed this week, because there's a great point on it. If Tanamanjeet raised that point, or any other parliamentarian, there was one great parliamentarian who raised that this week as well that I saw a clip of. I can't remember his name now, but he spoke with a northern accent. He's a Gora white man speaking on it. And he then said, I'm not going to give way, because the opposition was shouting, give way, heed way now. I'm not going to give way because you lot talk rubbish. He goes, you've had your chance to speak rubbish. Now, here's the thing that happens in the House of Commons that's really interesting to note. Even though you speak out and you say something, doesn't mean it's actually going to change the bill and the wording of the bill and the way it goes.
It doesn't.
You have to be one hell of an orator to get people behind you. And it's more than just being an orator. You've got to have done that work by lobbying in the corridors of
you have to talk to
Westminster.
people individually to get them to flip and vote against it.
Right.
Literally, like in House of Cards.
Yeah,
that's it. Now, here's the question I'm going to throw. Here's the question I'm going to throw back at you both. This week, that bill was passed, as you rightly said, and it's going to massively affect immigrants in particular, but then also offspring of immigrants.
Yeah.
And people who are Black and ethnic minority groups are going to suffer the most. How many mainstream news broadcasters and editors and publications did you see cover that this week?
None.
that bill was
only the
passed?
Guardian. That's it, because the Christmas party thing happened. That was the leading story. This whole immigration thing was brought up 3 weeks prior, but by the Guardian saying this proposed bill may mean this, and people read it and thought, "Oh, that's nice." That's it. It didn't go anywhere. But now that it's potentially going to be passed, it's going to be passed. It's a problem.
And it's gone into the House of Lords. It's passed its final reading in the Commons. So now it'll get approved by the Lords. The Lords are usually pretty good, though, at like censoring some of this stuff down, watering it down, sending it back. But I've got to think I can't remember why. I read something on it literally earlier this morning that said that it's probably going to go through in the way that we all thought it would now, the way we've been scared about it for the last 2-3 weeks. But it hasn't just suddenly come out of nowhere in the last 2-3 weeks. It's been hidden this week because of the Christmas party. Now, this is tinfoil hat time, arguably, but it was pretty damn convenient that the Christmas party thing happened at the exact same time as that bill. Now, I'm not saying it happened because of that bill being passed this week and to deflect attention, but I'm saying it was bloody handy that and the Omicron virus all happening at the same time. It was a great week to get that bill through. Is the point I'm making. Push it through. As in without coverage. I mean, it was earmarked to go through this week anyway, so it's not like they stuck it in.
It's very smart how things have gone in this way, and it's logical, and I can see why that works. But every government does this at all levels, whether it's Tory, Labour, any. When it comes to the end of the term or recess, they push a load of bills through, and no one realizes. And sometimes it goes under the radar.
And what you're doing is this week, I mean, the thing is, they could push this through under the radar as much as they want. A newspaper editor or the BBC News editor online for online news, the person who's the editor for Radio 4 of the Today programme, the editors of BBC News at 9, all of these people, I'm picking on just the BBC, we can go to ITV, we can go to all of them.
Yeah, you can go to all of them.
For me, the buck falls with them. Why aren't you covering this? They should have been covering it, and they didn't cover it. For me, the concern is covering. This government was always going to do that. You've got Priti Patel, who, barks out this bakwas week after week after week, dog whistling to the right about immigrants coming into this country in dinghies, overspilling. They're coming here because the hotels were seen as a soft touch. They just know they'll get to stay in hotels, blah, 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 which is completely removed from the reality that immigrants face when they come to this country, asylum seekers rather. And if you've got people of brown color skin doing that in the cabinet, then you could expect this government was going to push those kind of bills.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
Sajid Javid, Alok Sharma, these guys are not clean guys at all, at any level, right? So they're going to push this kind of stuff.
Same thing. Came from a very rich family from questionable roots.
I mean, he has some. He's married into the most questionable stuff. But with him, it's still at the moment, I think, at that level of, well, what has he actually done that might be a bit out there or dodgy and stuff like that, right? So let's say I give him a free pass just for that reason. I mean, I'm sure it's there. I haven't looked into it much, and he's still a little wet behind the ears, right? But the other ones, Alok Sharma, dear God, Google Alok Sharma and read his Wikipedia page. That's fun, right?
Homework for everyone listening, guys.
No one's ever done that. Like, people, we don't do this as a community. Alok Sharma was given the role of overseeing COP26, perhaps what was billed as being the most important, for the state of the climate change movement, for the state of our future, the future generations. The biggest thing internationally that was going to happen in this year, at a year when COVID's still rife, right? And he was the guy overseeing that. Go read his Wikipedia page and see that dude's history. Because then you suddenly look back at, that video that made him a little bit viral for a day, where he was crying at the end about them having got through this one concession at COP26. I don't know if you saw that, or if any of the viewers saw that. Go check that, because he goes like a lump in his throat.
Yeah.
And then people start applauding and they stand up and applaud. And then he comes back and he finishes and he's teary-eyed. Bullshit. I call bullshit. Those crocodile tears. Crocodile tears. He knew exactly what he was doing. This Banda's a seasoned veteran politician. He's really good at what he does. And the places they gather money is what you'll read on the Wikipedia pages. Who they're lobbying for. Who he was lobbying for made no sense that this guy got COP26, right?